Morning came the same way it always did, slow reluctant, as if the land itself had to convince the sun to rise again. A pale ribbon of light slipped over the hills and touched the ranch house like a question that had been asked too many times. Frost clung to the fence posts. The wind moved through dry grass with the sound of something remembering how it once felt to be alive. The rancher was already awake. He had learned long ago not to sleep deeply. Out here, rest was a fragile thing. It broke easily. He rose from his narrow bed, joints stiff, breath steady, boots waiting exactly where he left them. The house smelled of old wood and yesterday's coffee. Everything had its place. Everything stayed. The land knew him. It knew the weight of his footsteps, the rhythm of his work, the way he paused every morning at the doorway, hand resting on the frame, as if listening for a voice that never came. Years had passed like this. Seasons stacking one atop another. Neighbors drifting away. Graves filling quietly. He had not chosen solitude so much as learned how to live inside it. The world had thinned around him, and he had adapted, the way men do when no one is watching. Outside, the cattle shifted and breathed. The sky widened. He moved among his chores without hurry. No one waited for him. No one asked questions. Time felt softer when it belonged to only one man. It was near midday when he first saw her. Not dramatically. Not like a story meant to impress. She stood near the road, unsteady, one hand braced against a weathered post, her body thin but upright, pride keeping her from sitting in the dust. The wind tugged at her coat. Her hair had escaped its tie, brushing her cheek in small, nervous movements. He did not ask who she was. He asked if she could stand much longer. Her answer came after a pause. A small nod. The kind that cost effort. She did not look broken. She looked tired in a way sleep could not fix. That he offered water first. Then shade. Then silence. He understood silence. He knew its shapes. When she finally stepped into the ranch house, it was as if the walls inhaled. The room felt altered, not crowded, but aware. She sat carefully, as though listening to her body for instructions it refused to give clearly. He noticed things without meaning to. The way her hands trembled slightly when she lifted the cup. The way pain crossed her face and then retreated, leaving only calm behind. A practiced calm. She spoke little. When she did, her words were chosen like stones placed carefully across a stream. She did not ask for rescue. She did not tell her story. Only later, in fragments, did pieces surface. A man who had once promised steadiness and left when steadiness became heavy. A place where her suffering had been called inconvenient. A road that led here because there had been nowhere else to go. The rancher did not comment. He had learned that some truths needed air, not answers. Days unfolded slowly. She stayed. He did not ask how long. She did not say. They fell into a rhythm built of small kindnesses. He cooked. She folded laundry when her strength allowed. They shared meals without ceremony. Sometimes they spoke of nothing. Sometimes they spoke of the weather as if it were a living thing with moods of its own. Night. The lamp cast soft shadows across the walls. The house no longer felt empty. It felt held. He noticed how she watched the sunset, as if memorizing it. How she breathed through moments of pain with patience rather than complaint. How gratitude lived in her eyes, quiet and deep. There was no sudden closeness, no romance rushing ahead of truth. Only trust, growing the way grass does after rain. Slowly, without announcement, the land seemed to notice too. The wind softened near the porch. Even the silence felt less sharp. As if something wounded had been acknowledged at last, he told himself it was temporary. All things were. He had learned that lesson early. Still, when he caught himself listening for her footsteps, when he found his mornings shaped around another presence, he understood something was changing, not loudly, not safely, but honestly. That night, long after she had gone to rest, he sat alone at the table. The lamp flickered. The house breathed around him. He pressed his palm flat against the wood, grounding himself in something solid. The land had learned his name long ago. But now, for the first time in years, it felt like it was asking him to learn someone else's, and he did not yet know how much that knowing would cost. The change did not arrive all at once. It never does. It came the way winter comes to dry land. Quietly, patiently, with no regard for what was wished. First, it was only the mornings that betrayed her. The way she sat longer on the edge of the bed before standing. the careful pause before each step, as if her body needed convincing. By afternoon, she often seemed steadier, her smile returning like a borrowed thing she meant to give back before nightfall. The rancher noticed without naming it. He had learned that naming made things real. Real things demanded action. And there were some actions a man prayed never to face. He brought her water without being asked, left bread within reach, slowed his own pace so hers would not feel small. These were the ways he knew how to care. Quietly, without claiming virtue. Some days she helped more. Other days she sat near the window and watched the light shift across the land, her hands folded, her breathing measured. Pain visited her like an unwelcome relative. Stayed too long. Left without apology. When it became harder for her to hide, he went riding that he rode farther than usual, dust rising behind him like a trail of urgency. He returned with herbs wrapped in cloth, bottles with labels half worn away, promises spoken carefully by men who feared certainty more than failure that a doctor passed through once. An old one, eyes tired, voice careful. He examined her gently, as if she were made of something fragile and already thinning. That he did not say much. Only that bodies have limits. Only that some burdens cannot be carried forever. The rancher thanked him anyway. Gratitude came easier than hope. Neighbors had opinions. They always did. One said pain was the price of living. Another said endurance was proof of character. None of them stayed long enough to see the nights. None of them listened closely enough to hear her breathing change after dusk. She never complained. Not once. When pain bent her inward, she breathed through it, eyes closed, jaw set in quiet resolve. Strength lived in her not as defiance, but as grace. One evening, the lamp burned low and the house seemed smaller, as if drawing inward with her. He sat nearby, pretending to mend something that did not need fixing. She watched the flame, her face pale in its glow. The words came softly, almost politely. "Please, don't let me suffer." They were not spoken with fear. They were spoken with trust. The room absorbed them. The walls, the table, the spaces between breaths that he did not answer. There was no answer ready. He reached for her hand instead. It was warm, too warm. He held it, as if holding could anchor her to the world, as if his grip might persuade pain to loosen its hold. She slept soon after. He did not doubt. He sat there long into the night, listening to the small sounds of the house. The ticking, the settling wood, the wind brushing against the eaves like a question asked again and again. That he thought of the man who had left her. Not with anger, with a distant understanding. It is easy to walk away from what asks too much. Harder to stay when love becomes heavy. Outside, the land rested under stars sharp as truths. Inside, a man weighed something no scale could measure. That he realized then that love was not always about keeping someone breathing. Sometimes it was about how gently you bore witness to their pain. The thought frightened him. It stayed. Morning would come. Chores would wait. She would wake and smile as if nothing had happened. But something had already shifted. A line had been crossed, quietly, without ceremony. The body, he understood, cannot carry everything forever, and neither, he feared, could the heart. Sleep abandoned him after that night. Not all at once. Not cruelly. It simply learned how to leave the door open. He lay awake listening to her breathing through the thin wall. Each rise and fall felt like a borrowed gift. Each pause stretched longer than comfort allowed. He counted them without meaning to, the way men do when fear pretends to be vigilance. Days passed. He worked as before, fed the cattle, repaired what weather had worn thin. To anyone watching, nothing had changed. But inside him, a question paced without rest. The doctor's words returned in fragments. Bodies have limits. Some burdens cannot be carried forever. They did not accuse him. They did not comfort him either. Others offered counsel when they sensed something was wrong. A neighbor spoke of God's will, his voice firm, his eyes distant. Another warned him of judgment, of laws written by men who never sat beside a bed at night and listened to someone suffer quietly. He nodded. He thanked them. He did not invite them to stay to at dusk. The woman would sit by the window when she had the strength. The lights softened around her, as if the day itself did not wish to leave her yet. He joined her there sometimes. They spoke little. Words felt too sharp for what lived between them now. She knew. Not because he told her, but because love sharpens perception. She sensed the storm behind his eyes, the careful way he touched her hand, the hesitation before each kindness. One evening, When pain had thinned her voice but not her resolve, she turned to him. "You don't have to carry this alone," she said. There were no accusations in it. No pleading. Only permission. He sat with that permission like a man holding fire. Warmth and danger bound together. That night, he remembered things he had buried. His mother's last winter. The way suffering had been praised as noble while it hollowed her from the inside. The way mercy had been discussed but never offered. He understood then why the choice would be his alone. Love, he realized, is not proven by endurance. It is proven by honesty, by the courage to see suffering clearly and refuse to look away. When the moment came, it came without ceremony. No sunrise, no thunder. Only the small room. The low light. His hand steady though his heart was not. He sat beside her. She was calm, ready in the quiet way of someone who has made peace not with death, but with release. He held her hand. She squeezed once, faintly. Enough that he stayed present. That was the promise he kept. There were no grand words. Only breath slowing. Only stillness arriving like dusk across open land. Afterward, he remained where he was. Time passed without shape. When he finally stood, the room felt different. Not empty. Complete. The choice stayed awake long after everything else had rested. It would follow him into every morning that remained. The morning after did not announce itself. Light crept in the way it always had, pale and cautious, touching the floorboards, the table, the empty chair by the window. The rancher rose slowly, as if the day might shatter if handled too roughly. Outside, the land waited. Cattle needed feeding. Water needed drawing. The world, it seemed, had no intention of stopping. He moved through his tasks with the same steady hands, though something in him had shifted its weight. Not broken, rebalanced. Word traveled faster than mercy ever had. People came, or sent others in their place. Some looked at him as if he were dangerous. Others as if he were already condemned. There were questions shaped like accusations, and silences heavy with judgment. He did not argue. He did not explain that he had learned that explanation often asks for forgiveness where none is offered. They called it unforgivable. They said suffering was sacred. That endurance proved worth. That mercy had rules written far from places like this. He listened. Then he returned to his land. The house held her absence gently. Her cup still sat where she had left it. A folded cloth lay unfinished. These were not wounds. They were reminders of having loved well. At night, he spoke to her memory, not in sorrow, but in gratitude. He thanked her for trusting him, for teaching him that kindness does not always look like patience. Sometimes it looks like release. The seasons turned. Grass returned where it had thinned. The land softened again. It did not judge him. It never had. He understood then that forgiveness does not always arrive from others. Sometimes it must be built quietly inside, plank by plank, until it is strong enough to stand on its own. That he had chosen mercy. He would carry the cost. And now, to you who have listened quietly through this telling, if you have ever loved someone enough to sit with their pain, if you have ever faced a choice no one else could make for you, if you have ever been judged by those who did not stay long enough to understand, know this. Gentleness is not weakness. Mercy is not cruelty. And love does not end when breathing does. If this story settled somewhere deep in you, take a moment. Let me know your thoughts. Share where you're listening from. What land surrounds you as you hear these words? And if stories like this matter to you, stay. Like. Subscribe. Walk these quiet roads with us again. Some truths are best carried together.